I'll just call them gun control advocates. All right. Or what do they call themselves? Gun violence reductionists or something. They have some funny term for themselves.
Gun safety advocates.
Gun safety. All right. Yeah. I know what that means. I've read enough Orwell to, figure that one out.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi folks, welcome again to another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, and the natural right of self-defense and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 136, brought to you by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Check them out at cooksholsters.com. Again, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week. There's something like 500,000 podcasts available to listen to, and you only have 24 hours a day to listen and 2 ears, and the fact that you've chosen to spend a part of your day with us means a lot to me. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for your continued support. Depending on who you listen to this past week, thousands of school children are going to be gunned down with assault weapons in daily school shootings. Those of you women out there are going to die in back alley abortions. But if you don't, you'll be wearing red robes and your rights will be rolled back to the Dark Ages, all thanks to Brett Kavanaugh. I simply could not watch the hearings live. I don't need that much stupid in my life. Watching a decrepit moron like Dianne Feinstein try to lecture Brett Kavanaugh about the meaning of common use, suggesting that millions of Americans owning modern sporting rifles doesn't mean they're in common use, was enough to make me want to pull my hair out. She then went on to claim that thousands of children every year are killed by assault weapons, which is just a bold-faced lie. And then you had that cross-eyed Mayor Not Smarticus threatening to break Senate rules, acting all, I'm going to risk my career by releasing Brett Kavanaugh's confidential emails without approval. I'm Spartacus. You're a moron. Because, one, the documents had already been cleared for release, and two, they actually proved that Brett Kavanaugh's not in favor of racial profiling. Why are we rushing this? What's the big rush? We need more time to go through his emails and we got to go through his opinions. We need more time. To which I honestly wish someone had responded, we just need to confirm him to find out what his opinions are. This is the same bunch of clowns that passed Obamacare without even reading it. And when it came to abortion, they left no doubt that for the Democrat Party, the killing of the unborn for the convenience of the living is the sacrament of the left. According to Senator Feinstein, millions of women died in back alley abortions before Roe, and even the liberal media could not stomach that lie, and they called her on it. And her spokesperson, she misspoke. She meant the number of procedures. Senator Gillibrand from New York claimed with a straight face that women will die if we confirm Brett Kavanaugh. Gloria Steinem this week was quoted as saying that abortion is the foundation of our democracy. Somehow I just don't understand how the founders considered killing the unborn to be the foundation of our democracy. I missed that in my civics class. You know, if someone like Brett Kavanaugh makes the left this frothingly insane, he's got my support. A couple of things from Luther came to mind as I pondered this week. Luther believed that you could not have both, that if you couldn't have both a prudent and a good ruler at the same time, someone who was both good and prudent, that it was better to have someone who was wise but wicked, rather than having someone who was saintly and stupid. Unfortunately, when it comes to the Democrat Party, we don't have either one. Any party that fights so doggedly, lies so brazenly, acts so stupidly to protect the criminal, to disarm the law-abiding, to kill the unborn, they're manifestly wicked and profoundly ignorant. You see then what sort of spirit he must have who would exercise the office of a judge, wrote Luther. He must consider all effects upon him of fear, love, favor, mercy, avarice, hope, fame, life, and death. He must in all simplicity love the simple truth and a just judgment, because the judgment is the Lord's. For a judge is inevitably burdened with the hatred of many people, endangered by enmity and tempted by mercy and gain. If he does not look to God alone, he cannot overcome these attacks and hold his own against them. Now, as we've watched these insane histrionics orchestrated and paid for by the lunatic left and the Democrat Party this week, I know that was redundant, threatening Brett Kavanaugh and his wife and his children, keep him in your prayers. Keep our legislators in your prayers, that they can make just and equitable decisions that serve the common good, that they may stand firm in the truth in the face of the attacks from the media and the unhinged Democrat Party, who are trying to turn the work of the government into a circus to prevent good people from thwarting their evil agenda. And pray that whatever happens, God's will is done. And remember, especially those of you on the left, as Obama chided us back in 2008, elections have consequences. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with tips from Aaron, from Mia, from Sergeant Bill, and another special guest with us this week, Brett Grayson from Tactical Pay Radio. You're listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. I want to take a minute here to thank our partner, the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you're involved in a situation where you have to use your firearm in self-defense, you very well may find yourself in a legal battle against overzealous prosecutors or the families of the criminal who you shot or threatened, who are looking to deprive you of your freedom or your hard-earned savings. You may find yourself charged with a crime or facing a civil lawsuit even if you did nothing wrong. That's where Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network comes in. For a small yearly fee, they will provide you with money for attorneys, money for bail, consultations, and access to experts like Marty Hayes and Massad Ayub. Don't face the fight alone. Visit Armed Citizens Network today. Use the promo code ARMEDLutheran-25. Save $25 off your first year's membership, or you can grab the coupon on my website, armedlutheran.us. Sign up today. They will send you lots of cool resources, 8 instructional DVDs, and a book by Massad Ayub that I cannot recommend highly enough. Don't wait until you need their help. Be prepared. Sign up today. Visit armedcitizensnetwork.org.
It's time for this week's self-defense tip from Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense here with your personal defense tip of the week. This week I want to talk to you about something that's important to do, but a lot of people probably are a little bit hesitant to have the conversation and maybe outright avoiding it. And that has to do with elderly people and firearms. I was having a discussion with my grandpa earlier this week, and he told me that he had my uncle come and take all of his rifles back to his house because he didn't feel like he would be able to adequately use them for personal defense, and he doesn't go hunting anymore, and so he wanted them to be in a safe place where they could be protected if someone was to break in, and so they wouldn't be stolen, and taking that responsible step of admitting, hey, I'm a little bit older, I can't really use these anymore, and if someone was to break in, they would just get stolen because I don't have a real great ability to protect them from thieves or any other kind of worst-case scenario. Now, lucky for us, he's got the wherewithal and the mental capacity to make that decision, but some of you may have parents or grandparents who are not all there as far as their mental capacity is concerned. And it's important for us as gun owners and as people who are responsible as gun owners to have those conversations when it's time to have those conversations. If you have somebody who is elderly and losing their mental faculties and is more of a danger with firearms than they are as far as being able to defend themselves, then you need to recognize that and have those conversations, even if they may be tough for you. It may be tough to sit down with dad or grandpa and say, hey, look, I think we need to do something about your firearms because I don't want you to hurt yourself or somebody else because of the mental state that you're in. And that's something that we have to do as people who are responsible gun owners, because if we don't take those kinds of steps, then serious tragedies can happen. You can read all about them in the newspapers. There's all kinds of examples of people who, outside of their mental capacity, have done unfortunate things with their firearms and either hurt themselves or someone else. And if we don't take the steps as responsible caregivers when it comes time to have those conversations, then we can be contributing to that without even knowing it. So if you have anybody in your life who fits that category, who maybe is a little bit up there in age and is maybe experiencing some mental difficulties, and it would be more of a danger for them to have firearms in their house than it would be to protect them, then you need to be willing to have that conversation so that bad things don't happen. And that's you meeting your responsibility as a family member who loves that individual and as a responsible gun owner. So think about that if you have anybody in your life that fits that category. That's your personal defense tip for the week. Thanks for tuning in.
Aaron Israel is a Personal Defense Network contributor and owner of Fundamental Defense. You can find out more and sign up for any of Aaron's classes at fundamentaldefense.com.
Hey, if you're like me, you like shopping at gun shows. No pressure from sales staff, no need to bother them to ask to look at stuff. You just pick stuff up and dry fire it and look at it and hold it. Imagine if you could get that experience at your local gun store, where you don't need to bother anybody. You don't have to ask people for help if you don't need it. You don't have salespeople hovering over your shoulders. Well, this is what it's like when you shop at G4G Guns. Cassie and Patrick Coburn are the owners, and you've heard them on the program before. They are absolutely awesome people, and they'll help you find exactly the right gear for you. But there's no sales pressure. You just browse the store, you pick up and hold anything that you want to look at without asking permission, just like at the gun show. And once you've found the gun you want, or if you actually do need assistance, Patrick and Cassie are there to help. It's the best of both worlds, gun shop and gun show, in one place. It really is the best. G4G Guns. They're located at 2035 Central Circle, Suite 108 in McKinney, Texas. They're open Mondays from 1 to 6, Tuesday through Thursday 11 to 7, and on the weekends you'll find them at a gun show near you. Or check them out online at G4G Guns. That's G, the number 4, G, guns.com. G4G Guns, the gallery for great guns. G4GGuns.com.
Up next, it's Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstein.
Hello there. I wanted to give you another tip about hunting in the field. We talked last week about getting off of the bench and actually practicing holding your gun and practicing positions. Something else I wanted to let you know is when you're out in the field, sometimes those positions are not always comfortable. Sometimes there are other things you can use around you or bring with you that will make you more steady in your shots. So obviously you cannot take the shooting bench in the field unless you happen to be shooting from a box stand or something like that. But I'm really referring to spot and stock hunting. So there are some devices and items that you can use to steady your shots. You can use monopods, bipods, tripods, or shooting sticks. All of these you really need to practice with at the shooting range before you go out on the hunt. And I really like tripods because I've mentioned points of contact in another episode. And points of contact for support, contact with the ground. With the tripod, you've got yourself plus the 3 legs of the tripod supporting the gun. It's a lot more steady than a bipod or even a monopod. So you definitely want to practice with these in the field. I actually have a trigger stick that's a tripod, and those legs adjust to different lengths with the pull of the trigger. So you can really get into position really fast. There are also bipods that you can get that mount on to the front end of your rifle. Swagger makes one that it pivots and moves as you move. If the animal's walking, you can move and not have to reset up. So those are things that you want to look for and practice with before you get in the field. Something else, if you're spot and stock hunting, your rifle has a sling on it. And last week I talked about shooting positions and ways to get steady in a standing position. You can actually use your sling to add support. You can use the sling to pull against for resistance. Wrap it around your elbow. It'll help support the gun. Practice this at the range. Even with your bipod and your tripod, you can use the sling in conjunction with those for support. So give that a try when you're at the range. If you're spot and stock hunting, you often have a backpack with you. That backpack, you can sling that off and set the gun on there, the fore end on the backpack for a rest. The more of the human element that you can pull out, the better stable and supported your gun is going to be. So keep that in mind. Something I want to caution you guys about, I've actually seen, and I know a few people that have used their hunting partners as a rest for their gun. Well, guess what? A hunting partner breathes and wiggles too. So there's one reason that's not a great idea. Another reason is you've got muzzle blast, you've got the sound. I hope they have hearing protection. It's just not a good idea. Don't use your hunting partner as a rest. You can, however, use rocks. If there's a good rock in the field, you can lay across the rock, steady yourself on that. Then maybe you want to put a jacket or backpack down so you're not rubbing your rifle on the rock. Logs, dead trees that are fallen down, or even tree limbs. You can use those as a brace if it's at the proper height. Or just a tree itself. Lean against the tree, put your hand up there, use your thumb and your hand to make a V, pull your hand against the tree, and then just rest the fore end of your gun in the V of your hand. And that's a great on-the-spot way to form a rifle rest and get yourself more steady. Another thing is just practice that breathing technique that I've mentioned, the brass technique. Practice with adrenaline. If you can exercise and then go shoot your gun when your blood is a little higher pumping, that's great. And I hope that you can practice all of these before you head to the field so that you're successful in your hunts. Have a great one. Bye, guys.
You can read more from Mia and watch her YouTube videos at miaanstein.com.
Hey guys, it's Mia here. If you follow me on social media, you know that I often share morning inspiration. Many people ask how I can keep this up every day. Well, it starts with my morning readings and that perfect cup of coffee. The official Dunkin' Donuts shop provides coffee lovers with everything they need, from K-Cup pods, original blended coffee, tea, drinkware, and more. Who doesn't want Dunkin' delivered to their front door? Shop today at www.armedlutheran.us/coffee and help support Armed Lutheran Radio today.
Let me take a moment to tell you about our membership site, the Reformation Gun Club. Members get exclusive content, all the segments, full-length interviews, full-length episodes of Clinging to God and Guns with extra content not released previously. They're kind of like the movies with the extended cuts or the director's cuts. Oftentimes what we have to do is trim those segments down so we can fit them into a reasonable time in the show, and that means extra content for you as a member of the Reformation Gun Club. You get access to our closed Facebook group, discounts from our partners like Gunbox gun safes, easy-to-see targets, Dowtech Force, Cook's holsters, Talon gun grips, inline fabrication, much more. So go check it out on Patreon. We've moved to Patreon. Registration is much easier. You get your own unique RSS feed, which means you can paste that into your favorite podcast app and take it with you and listen anywhere. For as little as $2 a month, you can take advantage of all of those benefits and help support the show. Visit patreon.com/armedlutheran or go to gunclub.armedlutheran.us and sign up today.
Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Sylvia.
Hey everybody, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. So this week I want to talk to you about my new Gen 5 Glock 34 MOS. So, I like Glocks, but I'm not what I would call a Glock guy. I do shoot them a lot because, well, that's my work gun and my carry gun most of the time. So, it doesn't hurt to be good with your tools of your trade. But I do have to say this. There are things that I like about the Gen 5 and things that I don't like. So, the finger grooves is usually the first thing everybody wants to talk about. It's not a deal breaker. It's not that big a deal. I have found some issues with the sights and the trigger. So, the Glock 34 in the Gen 5 is only out in the MOS, the Modular Optics System, or whatever it stands for. So, it has that plate on the top. So, unfortunately, because of that plate, you can't really put adjustable sights on there, which isn't a huge deal, but it's kind of nice in competition guns to have adjustable sights. Now, with most competition guns, I'm like everybody else. I like to improve the gun, improve the trigger, smooth it out, shorten it, do, whatever I can to make it a little bit better. My Gen 4, I only did a few improvements to it and was easily got the stock 4.5 to 5 pound trigger down to about 3.5 without any over travel, and that makes a huge difference in how striker fired guns shoot. But with my Gen 5, it had anywhere from a 5.5 to 6.5 pound trigger pull from the factory. So in trying to change some of the parts, the most common ones are changing out the trigger return spring, which is the spring that is used to pull the trigger. It helps you pull it, but it also helps return it back to its natural resting place and kicks out the safety. Well, in the Gen 5 model, they have changed it, so the trigger return spring is built into this little doohickey, and it's a tiny little spring, and it's kind of difficult to get to. You can get to it. I got to mine just to kind of look at it. The problem is nobody makes any aftermarket ones that have a higher poundage pull weight to them. So usually it's a stock 5-pound spring. On a Gen 3 or 4, you put a 6-pound spring in it, and you usually chop off about 3/4 to a pound on your trigger pull. And on the Gen 5, until somebody comes out with an aftermarket part to replace that, that's not happening. So then I put an aftermarket connector on it. Now, the connector that comes with it is actually pretty good. The design and the shape of it is pretty similar to the Ghost Edge connector, which is, as far as drop-in, no-fitting connectors, is kind of the standard. It's really good in most of the Gen 3 and Gen 4 Glocks. So then I put a Vanek trigger housing on it, which is basically a set screw that limits the distance the striker and the cruciform and all that, the trigger will go. So basically, it stops your trigger from moving after it breaks. It takes a little setting to do it, but I've had pretty good success with them. I've seen other companies that do it on the trigger with set screws, kind of like a 1911, but the Vanek trigger housing has always worked well for me in all my different Glocks, and it seemed to work pretty well in this one too. Then I also did a guide rod and a different spring, so it's a stainless steel guide rod and a different spring weight, so you can kind of tune it to your loads and your recoil. I had a Dawson magwell because I'm going to shoot ESP with it, and then I put it on the trigger scale, and I was still getting like 5 to 5.5 pounds, which is not really that good with all these different competition modifications in it. So I broke my cardinal rule of never really messing with the striker spring, and I got a Terran Tactical 4.5 pound striker spring, which is only 0.5 pound less than the stock 5 pound striker spring, and it did improve the trigger, so much so that it would fail the safety check. So if you pressed the trigger and didn't release the striker, didn't make it fire, and then let go of the trigger, it was not reliably resetting the trigger safety, that little kick-out dingus that's in the trigger of a Glock. And if you press the trigger back, made it fire, or dry fired it, and then you ran the slide, and then you let go of the trigger, which they do in a lot of IDPA safety checks, it was not reliably kicking out the trigger safety. Now, if you've messed with aftermarket parts for Glocks a lot, you're probably saying the same thing I am. Well, what is causing it? So the other day I took that gun apart at least 20 times in one day and was trying different parts and stock parts, trying to narrow down which single part was causing it not to be reliably safe, not to activate that final trigger safety. And it turns out it was the striker spring. So I ended up going back to the 5-pound striker spring. So here I am with a 5-pound Gen 5 Glock 34 trigger. It's nice. It doesn't have very much over travel, if any at all, and it's not a bad trigger. My work gun has a similar trigger, but with more over travel, because we're not allowed to mess with any of those parts. But it's not what my Gen 4 was. It's not what several Gen 3s I've had before were, as far as a competition-only gun and competition trigger. So, kind of wondering if I'm going to shoot it or not. I will say this for the Gen 5s. Their magazine followers, the orange magazine followers that they have in those guns, are fantastic, because when you are checking how many rounds you have in your gun when you're loading it, if you're talking to somebody or something at a match and you're losing focus on how many rounds you put in the gun, that orange follower through those itty-bitty little holes in the back of the Glock magazine are super bright, and it's really easy to see how many rounds you have stuffed into that mag. So if you need to replace any magazine followers, I'd suggest doing it with the Gen 5 magazine followers, or maybe even painting the backside of your magazine follower where the witness holes are on the back of the magazine. I've thought about doing that too. So I know this has been way more than a minute, but I guess the whole point of it is the Gen 5 Glock. Is it great for lefties with the ambi slide release? Very nice. Yeah, I like it a lot. The marksman barrel seems to be a little bit more accurate. And all in all, it's a really good gun. But until somebody comes out with some aftermarket trigger return springs or something else that'll kind of lessen the trigger weight without affecting the safety in the trigger, it's hard for me to call it a fantastic competition gun. So here I am 3 weeks from Nationals trying to decide if I'm going to shoot my Gen 5 Glock 34 or if I'm going to shoot something else in ESP. Because really, a heavier trigger boils down to less accuracy and less speed. And when you get up there in the echelons of IDPA and you're trying to beat some of the guys that I'm hoping and trying to best, you need every advantage and you need all the accuracy that you can muster, because points down are seconds added to your time. So accuracy is even more important the faster you get in IDPA. So who knows? Maybe I'll be shooting a 9mm 1911. I haven't decided yet. Oh well, keep on practicing. I'm Sergeant Bill. This has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Sylvia is a veteran of the Dallas Police Department and masterclass competitive shooter. You can watch Sergeant Bill's shooting videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill.
Hey there, this is Sergeant Bill. After the successful completion of a match, Lloyd and I like to get together and top it off with a celebratory cigar. We get our post-match cigars from Cigar Page, home of America's best cigar deals. Visit armedlutheran.us/cigar and get a great deal, and also help support Armed Lutheran Radio.
All right, I want to take a minute here to thank our incredible sponsor, Cook's Holsters. They have been with us from day one when this show was just an idea, really, before we even started the podcast. And I was so impressed with Bob Cook and his products that I signed up to become a dealer. I believe in the product so much, I wanted to sell it myself. Cook's Holsters makes custom Kydex holsters for range work, for concealed carry, for competition. inside the waistband, outside the waistband, in a variety of colors and prints and mounting options. Check out the new series of patriotic printed Kydex holsters as well. Those are really cool. And you may be asking yourself, every time you hear me talk about Cook's holsters, well, what's the big deal? Why should I trust Cook's holsters when there are so many other Kydex holster makers out there? Listen, Cook's makes the molds and sells printed Kydex that many of the other holster manufacturers actually use to build their holsters. This is a great company. This is a great product. They come with a lifetime warranty against defects, 100% satisfaction guarantee, or your money back. Check them out today at cooksholsters.com. Be sure to use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST, that's all one word, and save 10% off your order. Go to cooksholsters.com today. Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Our special guest this week is the host of another show on the Self-Defense Radio Network. Brett Grayson is the host of Tactical Pay Radio, a show I was honored to appear on way back in episode 10, I believe. Brett, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hey, I'm happy to be here, Lloyd. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you here finally. I'm sorry it took so long. So tell us a little bit about Brett Grayson. You're a history teacher, I understand.
Yes, I teach all kinds of history. I've taught everything from pre-K 3 all the way through master's level courses. So
Wow.
When I say I'm a history teacher, people say, what grades? And I'll say, which grade do you like? What was your favorite grade? I probably taught it. But I currently teach 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade history. So it covers pretty much all of human history.
Very good. So are you is it in the public school system? It's in the Houston area, I believe,
It
right?
is, yeah. I currently teach at a small private school in Houston, but I used to teach at a large public school called Nimitz High School, and I taught there for about 6 years. And I really enjoyed that, but I came to a fork in the road. I had earned my MED, my master's in education, that focused on English language learner instruction. And so that was really useful. I got a lot of skills and knowledge out of that degree. And then they suggested that I apply for their doctoral program. It was a PhD in educational research, and it focused on quantitative research. And at this point, if your listeners' eyes haven't glazed over, then I am very impressed. The moment I say quantitative research, you see people glaze over. But the deal was, if you want to pursue that degree, then it's a full-time deal. So I quit my position teaching and got an internship at the research department in the school district and started doing coursework and stuff like that full-time. So after a few years of that, I completed the PhD program. I was Dr. Brett Grayson. And long story short, I ended up doing what I do best, which is teaching high school history. And now I also do a podcast. So things kind of worked out funny in the end because, when you go through a doctoral program, you don't see at the end of the road teaching high school, but that's what I'm good at. And that's what I enjoy doing. And I also teach summer semester courses for the local community college. So I still maintain, work in the academic field, but working as a history teacher is what I enjoy most. So that's what I do. And then I also do this podcast, and that's why I'm here. And now let me take the opportunity to thank you for having my podcast as part of your Self-Defense Radio Network, because that's really cool.
Well, it's I can't take credit for the network, but I'm happy that we ran across each other, and you when you reached out, and I was on your show, and when I became a member of the board of directors for the network, I was trying to think of shows that would be good for the network to help the network grow, and good people and good content, and yours was one of the ones that came to mind, and I immediately reached out, and I am grateful that you joined us. So, and I apologize for not addressing you properly as Dr. Grayson.
No, please don't. Dr. Grayson is my father. So,
okay.
Yeah, I the only people I don't correct are my students, because I don't want to make them think about it. Don't call me. Okay, fine. Do that routine. So you don't want to have confusion over how you should be addressed.
Right.
That should be something that's very clear from day one. And they said they'd prefer to call me Dr. G or Dr. Grayson. I said, whatever you pick, just everybody needs to stick with it. As long as it's uniform, I'm happy with it.
Right.
Yeah. So yes, apologies. All that to say, apology accepted, Lloyd.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So according to your bio, you got involved with guns in at a scout camp as a kid.
Yes. I was fortunate enough to join Cub Scouts, and by that I mean my parents put me in Cub Scouts.
Right. That's kind of how it works.
And it was great, and I loved it. And then of course, you go from Cub Scouts into Boy Scouts, and I went on to earn my Eagle, and I really enjoyed it. And some of the things we would do were going to the gun range, and guns were very normal to me. I never experienced any sort of pushback or hostility towards gun ownership until, I went into the real world after college, and it kind of surprised me because this was something I took for granted. And also an appreciation for the Second Amendment was another thing that I just figured everybody had. I figured everybody was familiar with the background to the Constitution because I'm a history teacher and I love history, but most people don't, because history can be a slog for a lot of people. And if you don't have a good history teacher, then there's a good chance you just won't have an appreciation for the Constitution or things like the First and Second Amendment. And you don't understand how they factor into your life. Because we live in such a prosperous, secure country that I think a lot of the things that our founding fathers fought for are lost on people today. And so I don't even remember where I was going with all that, but so that my background as far as guns go. So yeah, I was never a gun expert, and I didn't join the military. I don't have an arsenal, all right? But that's really just because I'm a teacher, and there's only so many ways you can stretch a dollar.
Right, exactly.
So that's my background in firearms ownership and knowledge.
What is it? I was going to jump in there. Your comment about history and the way it's taught now, or our kids' understanding of history and the Constitution. Where is the disconnect? Where is it that I hear a lot of kids talk about how history tends to bore them with a focus on dates, and it's just and is it a matter of just the way it's being taught? Is it a matter of the standards that are required, meeting certain, government guidelines for testing? Is it, where is the disconnect that our kids are not coming out of high school with an appreciation for this country's history and our Constitution?
Yeah, that's the $64,000 question, right? How do we get kids to appreciate our shared history? And I think the disconnect is that history is hard to teach. And not that the other subjects aren't hard to teach. Of course they are. But history is unusual in that it requires critical thinking skills. And you have to be able to synthesize information in a way that isn't required in other subjects. And that's why it's so important that you have a good history teacher, someone who can explain to you how things played out and why they played out the way they did and how it can help you in the future. And if you don't have an understanding of the past, then you're really confused by current events. And so you're left to figure it out on your own. Well, if you figure it on your own, that just means that you go to Google and you punch in, terms, and then Google decides what information you need to answer that question. So that's why it's so important that you have a good history teacher. And so back to your question, where's the disconnect? The truth is, I hate to be Debbie Downer, but public schools they're hurting. And there's just not a lot of great teachers to go around. People who go into public education, they get discouraged real quick. And that's actually what my dissertation was about. It focused on turnover rates at public schools. And so, so I wish I had some sort of way to resolve this situation and say, I have the solution. Hear me out. Right. This will fix all of our problems. But the truth is, it's just not that simple. We're in some sort of a rut. And ironically, it's because I think we're so well off. When you're born into a good situation and that's what you stay in your whole life, you don't understand the necessity of the Bill of Rights,
Right. And our kids are so far. I think we've had a couple of generations now that basically grew up saying my kids are going to have it better than I ever had it. And unfortunately, as a result, as good as that sentiment is, I think it kind of removes those kids from an understanding of what it is their parents and their grandparents sacrificed.
Absolutely.
And so, like you said, that we've got it so good. I mean, our kids are looking for safe spaces because of things that they don't like, words that they don't like, or the wrong pronouns, and they have no idea what real hard times are like.
I think that's a big part of it. And I think also we're so far removed from gun ownership being commonplace. And I'm not exactly sure why, but it just seems like our gun IQ, our collective gun IQ as a country, is a lot lower than it was 100 years ago, that's the irony, is that 100 years ago, you wouldn't think people would be more educated. But I think when it comes to firearms, that was the case.
There's something, I had Matt Disher on a few weeks ago, and Matt used to be in the public school system in Michigan, and Matt from American Guns. And he related an example of, where he was in the teacher's lounge one day and somebody mentioned a hunting trip that they went on. And there was like this dead silence in the room and a really uncomfortable mood that came over the room. And it was like nobody knew what to say. And then finally somebody spoke up and said, "That sounds like fun. I'd like to go on one of those too." And then the next guy, it's like I think there's more gun people than we realize, but the media, and I think there's almost like this stigma of gun ownership now that the media has created, that a lot of people, especially in academia, just don't want to take a chance and out themselves almost.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, we now also live in a society where you live in constant fear of being accused of something you either did or didn't do, but just the accusation that's the verdict in itself. And so people are afraid to volunteer their thoughts online. And that's how we get situations like Hillary Clinton has a 99% chance of winning the 2016 presidential election, and then she loses and everybody says, "Well, what happened?" And there is something called the shy Tory effect. And this happened in England, where the polls don't match up with reality. And you wonder why. And of course, the answer is obvious, because people are afraid to volunteer their opinion. And I credit Matt Disher for, well, that wasn't him. He said it was someone else, actually, who said he went on a hunting trip. It wasn't Matt. But whoever that was, and the teacher,
he was in the room, yeah.
The teacher community across the country, I think I can generalize in this situation. They're not hunters, and they tend to lean to the left, politically. And there's different reasons for that. I mean, outside of the humanities department, or just specifically history, that's just the situation, because they're pretty much going to be people who aren't interested in generating high income, right? There is no profit motive for teachers. These are people who want to give back to society, and that's just the way it plays out. Is conservatives tend to want to make more money, and that's just not something that liberals are known for, is generating profit. Right. So anyway, that's why teachers tend to lean liberal, I think. And so whoever volunteered that they went on a hunting trip, kudos to them, because they put themselves on the line.
Right. And it was Cheryl Todd at Gun Freedom Radio who said it's almost to the point where it's harder to come out as a gun owner, to admit you own guns, than to admit that maybe you're transsexual or homosexual.
Well, sure. Absolutely. If there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? Not victimized status, but if there's no capital, there's no cultural capital in saying, in identifying with being a gun owner, then you won't get the high fives.
Yeah. So what was it like being the gun guy in the public school system? I asked the same question of Matt. What was your experience like?
Well, I think the question is really just what it's like to be conservative, because I feel like an appreciation for the Second Amendment, unfortunately, aligns with if there is such a thing as a political spectrum. So if the question is, how do you not go crazy being a conservative in the field of education? And And the answer is you just don't talk about it. That's the easy answer. No, no, of course you have to talk about it, because otherwise you'll never swing people to your side of the aisle. So you have to be willing to engage. But, you know, I mean, talking about guns with, you know, in a school environment is immediately an uncomfortable subject, because the moment guns and school are put in the same sentence, then it conjures up images of school shootings. So to be honest, those conversations just don't go well, because they're snake bit. And so all you can do is educate and don't try to don't push it too hard. You know, as with any conversation about politics, you want to tread lightly, because you don't want to hurt the person's feelings or jeopardize your friendship. So that's why I said, I just don't talk about it. Avoid it altogether. Then nobody gets their feelings hurt.
Right. So after Boy Scouts, what was and the experience of shooting? I think you said it was it sporting clays or trap? What was it?
That was in scouting. That's what we do. We go skeet shooting, but outside of that, my only exposure to guns was just going to the gun range with my dad. He had a Kel-Tec. Yeah. He had a 9mm, and I eventually got a 380, and that was pretty much it, because I don't come from a hunting family. And so my only interest in guns was for sport, but also for self-defense. And so that was it. But that's really all you need to stay informed and to keep up, you know, stay current with, you know, the firearms business.
So what, you said you got a 380. Was that the first gun you bought for yourself?
Yes, it was a 6-hour P238.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's a fantastic gun. Yeah.
What was the motivation for that one specifically?
I wish I had a technical answer to give you. John Lennon said, "Happiness is a warm gun in my hand." And I think that's a weird line, but I kind of knew what he meant when I felt that gun, and I thought, this fits my hand so perfectly. And then when I shot it, and it didn't have weird recoil, and it shot accurately, and I thought, well, what else could I ask for? What else could I ask for? Yeah. So, yeah, I wish I could give you technical specifications and say,
oh, no.
Yeah. But I can't, yeah.
Most of and that's the thing. And I think a lot of what the media and the left or they seem to miss or misunderstand about gun culture is the emotional attachment to guns. There's either it's tied to some memory because you grew up shooting, or there's something there's a hobby like competitive shooting, or there's some nostalgia because you own something that was handed down to you from a relative, or your father, or memories of going out shooting with your dad. Those kinds of things that I think the media and the left, who dislike guns so much, I don't think they get at all. The gun culture isn't all about like you said, the technical specifications. It's sort of a feel, an emotion. It's different from I think the way the media portrays it. I just don't think they understand it because they don't have that background.
I think it's even worse than, I think you're being very generous. I think they're totally ignorant. I think anybody who ended up being a talking head on one of these news channels, the chances of them knowing that AR doesn't stand for assault rifle, right? And every time that guns are in the news, they reveal their ignorance. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because this is an opportunity for them to become more informed. And it does happen. Mm-hmm. You have guys who are the leading lights on in liberal circles, guys like Sam Harris, who has a tremendously successful podcast, and he is a gun rights advocate. And he's not the only example, but he's the one that comes to mind. And so I think what I'm getting at is that the more they learn, the more likely they are to appreciate the Second Amendment. And they'll be less likely to say things like, well, they were talking about single shot rifles, and they were talking about pistols. And I think, well, no, you got to go back and read the literature, put it in context. You'll find out that's exactly what they meant, is the way it's being applied today. So, it's always an opportunity for comedy when people on MSNBC in particular reveal what they don't know. Yep. So that's the good news. That's the silver lining to the cloud.
And what always amuses me about that particular line of argument is, when they want to tell you that the founding fathers never intended, anything beyond the musket.
Right.
While they type their stories on their MacBooks, and text each other on their cell phones, and completely miss the irony of the way technology changes, and suggesting that our founding fathers never could have imagined that technology would change.
You have to laugh about it or you'll cry, especially speaking as a history teacher. If you get discouraged, if you find ways to get discouraged about it, then you will be discouraged. When they say things like, they were referring to guns used for hunting, and you have to shake your head and say, you don't understand how brutal it was back then. And only someone who lived a privileged life and spent their whole lives in air-conditioned rooms would think that guns were only used for hunting back then. But you hear people say that, people that actually have a following, people who are well respected, accomplished celebrities say things like that, and they have influence. And so the best you and I can do, and people like us in the Self-Defense Radio Network, is spread the word, make sure we get our facts right, and to put it into context, because that's the hard part, is putting things into context and helping people apply critical thinking.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, a couple of fun questions before we start talking about tactical pay. That the SIG, is that was the first one you bought? Do you still have it?
Oh yeah.
Is it? Have you added to the collection since?
No, I have not added to the collection for obvious reasons. Guns are expensive. Right. That's the thing nobody tells you.
Right.
That's the hard, the cold hard truth is that there's price barriers. But no, I haven't. I'm still loyal to my P238. Yeah,
that's cool.
I wish I could. And this brings up going back on what we were just talking about. I saw a debate on Mika. I can't pronounce her last name. Brzezinski. Yeah, she had a guest on who was saying who asked a similar question of a guest. What guns do you own? What guns should we be allowed to have? And then I think it was Mark Halperin, and he said, "Well, should we be allowed to buy bazookas?"
Oh, yeah, that's
and this guy gets paid to go on TV to talk about guns. And he was sincerely asking, well, should I be allowed to buy a bazooka? So when you asked me, have you added to the collection? I thought, I kind of want a bazooka.
Well, that was one of my questions, was going to be, if money were no object, is there something that sort of Santa keeps forgetting to bring each year that you
That's my question for guests, is if I gave you a free pass to walk into any gun range. No, I wish I had a good answer. Man, some of these answers, I have to go Google them because I've never heard of this firearm. And so, of course, the obvious answer is I want the exact gun that Dirty Harry used. I think that was a 357 Magnum. Am I wrong?
44 mag.
It's a 44 mag. Okay, right.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a microphone in front of my face. I forget my own name, let alone Dirty Harry's gun.
There's an old guy that comes out and shoots IDPA sometimes, and he shoots a 44 Magnum, and you'll find that he's been at the range because the brass is gigantic, and he comes out. You can hear him all the way across the range because it's the loudest freaking thing. And all the other guns sound exactly the same, whether they're shooting for the most part, whether they're shooting 9s or 45s or whatever. And when he starts shooting, it. And he dresses to the nines. He wears a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, and he wears a 3-piece suit with the little bolo tie thing.
Is it Clint Eastwood? Have you ever gotten a look at his face? It could be Clint.
He might have put on a beard and come out just to hone up his skills. It's possible.
I got to meet this guy. It sounds really interesting. Yeah.
I stopped and I had to take a picture one day because I was like, he's actually shooting the match. He's not just like hanging out here, watching people shoot. He's actually shooting. I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. I've never seen him shoot, but I've heard it.
That's me in 50 years. I just got to get the bolo tie.
There you go.
Right.
So that kind of negates my next question, which was, if you had one gun, if you could only keep one gun and had to get rid of the rest, what would it be and why? So that's a simple answer to that one. We'll just skip that question.
Yeah, I only have one option. Not even multiple choice.
Right. It's this one, and it's because it's the only one I've got. All right, next question.
That's right. Yeah, sorry. I wish I had a better answer and say, oh, this is Sophie's choice. Which one am I going to pick? But no, that was an easy one. The SIG.
So, do you get out and train with it? Do you just go to the range and plink? What are your interests in that regard?
Yeah, there's a couple ranges in the area, and about once every month or two, I go out there and just make sure that I haven't lost all skill and technique that I've picked up. Because if you don't use it, it's not like riding a bike.
No.
You do lose it, and you have to recalibrate your grip and your form, and so yeah, I have to make sure I have to make myself, because I've got kids and I've got a job, and things pull you in different directions, and then you realize, oh my gosh, months have gone by and I haven't gone to the range. How is that possible? So yeah, that's always an issue. It's just finding time. Yeah.
Yep. So how did you get into podcasting? How did that get started? Where what was the interest? How did Tactical Pay Radio come about?
It really just fell into my lap. I got a phone call from my buddy who runs a credit card processing company, and it's called Tactical Pay, of course, and they cater to firearms businesses. And so he calls me and he's telling me about it, because he had just recently started it with some other friends. And I said, that's really cool, man. Good luck with all that. And he said, yeah, we're catering to all types of businesses. If they sell ammo or accessories, gun ranges, dealerships. And I'm hearing him tell me about this, and we're friends. So it makes sense, he would share this with me, but he was really excited about it. And I said, why are you telling me all this?
Right. You're not going to hit me up for an investment, are you?
Yeah, exactly. There's really no way I could contribute. And then he said, well, we want to start a podcast, but nobody wants to host it. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And he said, so that's why I'm calling you, because you like to talk about guns, and you're fairly knowledgeable about all these topics. And he said, would you like to be the host of our podcast? And I said, well, sure, be my pleasure. And so I listen to podcasts like everybody else. And like a lot of people, I think to myself, I could probably do that just as well as the person I'm listening to. No names mentioned. And I wouldn't need an assistant. I could be like Rush Limbaugh, just no callers, nobody, just me. And so I got a microphone, and that was just a few months ago, actually. And then we came into contact with you, and I had a great conversation with you. And there's so many things that I wanted to talk about with you, because you're such a great resource. And how many people are so familiar with biblical scripture and the law and firearms. And so, but you have to be respectful of people's time. So, at an hour or so, you realize I got to cut it off. I don't want to overstay my welcome. We got to save it for next time. Shelve it. So I'm glad we get a chance to talk a second time. But anyway, so a few months ago, I called up a few people. I had some good interviews, and the whole idea of the podcast is to spread awareness of the company, of course, but also to be a part of the big conversation. And this is what I was talking about with my guest last week, is that when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, there was no David Hogg type character. There was, I feel like gun control advocates now in 2018 have a bigger voice than ever. And I don't think it's my imagination. I think there really is a push now for, I don't like to use the term gun grabbers, because I feel like that's demeaning. I don't need to be condescending or insulting, because I have the facts on my side, and so I'll just call them gun control advocates. All right. Or what do they call themselves? Gun violence reductionist or something. They have some funny term for themselves.
Gun safety advocates.
Gun safety. All right. Yeah. I know what that means. I've read enough Orwell to, figure that one out. So all that to say, the podcast has been really fun, and I hope people enjoy it. It's not long, it's only 30 to 40 minutes, and some podcasts, they go on for hours.
And who are some of the people that you've had on? I was really surprised that you asked me so early in the run. I was like, I'm B grade material.
No, don't sell yourself short.
You got Ken Blanchard going here.
Yeah, we've had Julie Golub, Julie G, Ken Blanchard. Just last week we had Dr. Bill Chackus, and oh my God, we've had so many. I had a guy on, Mitch Fitzpatrick, who is one of the best extended long range shooters in the world. And that was a really fun conversation, because the good thing about this podcast, I should say my favorite thing about my podcast, is that I get to learn so much. I'm not a gun expert. And I say that up front. I'm not the expert. I have the experts on to learn me all this material. And so I got to learn about this. It's essentially a new sport, ELR, extended or extreme long range shooting. And he was telling me how he can hit a target 2 miles away. I had no idea that was even possible. But so yeah, I've had a bunch of really cool guests. Of course, you ask me, and I've had like 30 or 40 guests on, and only 2 names come to mind. But yeah, of course, you were on there, episode 10, and Carrie Lightfoot was on there. She's an NRA board member. Yeah, there's been a lot of good guests. You can go to tacticalpay.com to check out all the episodes. We're also available on iTunes and Spotify. So yeah, if you go to tacticalpay.com, then you can check out the business. If you're an FFL or you run a gun range or a gun dealership, then definitely check out Tactical Pay, because they're the #1 company for credit card processing in the firearms industry. And yeah, so check out the website. You'll see my podcast as well, and all the different guests whose names don't come to mind. Of course, Matt Disher was on the other day, and we also had Craig DeLuz of the Firearms Policy Coalition. That was a really good conversation. He's a great guy. And
great guy.
And Juliana Crowder, CCW Maggie, Tiffany Johnson of Frontside Press. Had a bunch of great guests. Yeah. But I don't want to list all 30. That's not a good use of your listeners' time.
Nope, they can go to your website and check it out. They can check it out at the Self-Defense Radio Network at your podcast page. Just click on the logo. It's sdrn.us, and check out the information there about Brett and Dr. G, I should say.
There we have it.
And about his podcast. You can check out some of the latest episodes, and then swing on over to his website to check out more. Brett, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I hope you'll come back again, and anytime you'd like me to come on, I'd be honored to be on your show.
Oh, this is my pleasure, Lord. Thanks for having me on.
And that's going to wrap it up for this week's show. Thank you all for listening, for downloading, for subscribing. Thank you to our fine sponsors who make all this possible. Thank you to my awesome cast of contributors. And thank you, dear listener, for listening, for downloading, for subscribing. I hope you'll join us again next week. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn. This podcast is made possible by Cook's Holsters and contributions from listeners like you.